Hello and welcome to the Charles River Conservancy Parkland show. My name is Renata von Tscharner and we'll be talking about the parklands with somebody who knows them very well and in a way who represents the parklands in the state. Welcome, Marty Walz.
Great to be here.
Marty Walz is the state rep for many parts of the parklands, both on the Boston and the Cambridge side. So, Marty, tell us what parts of the parklands are in your constituency?
So on the Cambridge side, I represent everything from the Longfellow Bridge heading west to the River Street Bridge. And then on the Boston side, I represent everything from the North Washington Street Bridge all the way through the Back Bay.
Wonderful. Well, it's very important that we have a state rep who cares so much about the parklands because, as you all know, while we think of them as being the Cambridge parklands, they really belong to the state and they are taken care of by the DCR. So to have strong representation in the State House is very important. We obviously appreciate the city councillors caring about them, but ultimately it's a state responsibility and a state job to take care of the parklands.
It is, and the staff at the Department of Conservation and Recreation knows that I'm out there almost every weekend in the good weather, because sometimes I'll get home and send them an email about things that I see while I'm out there or things that I'd like them to address. So the staff of DCR is very aware how much time I spend out in the parklands along the Charles River, and I can see things that they may not know about because I'm out there so frequently.
So what brings you out there? Are you a runner, a biker, or what brings you out there?
I'm usually out there walking. So almost every weekend I do a full loop for about an hour to an hour and a half in the river basin. And when the weather gets nicer as well, I'll be out on my bike. I usually, since I live in the Back Bay in Boston, get on my bike and head west where there's far fewer pedestrians along the river and it's easier to bike when it's not quite so congested. But so I'll do some biking, but an awful lot of walking, particularly around the river basin.
Yeah, I was out there biking this past weekend and it was so busy that there was really not enough space for everybody to walk and bicycle. And I was thinking that in front of MIT, the plan is to have a bicycle path which is a little bit removed from the water's edge. And that's very much needed.
Yeah, I think that's a terrific idea. And frankly, we need that in the whole river basin. I was out on Sunday doing my hour-long walk in the river basin, and it was much too crowded for the cyclists, and frankly, even for the rollerbladers. They were really running into an awful lot of congestion, a couple of near misses when I was out there. So we need to do something, especially with the cyclists. But the good news is people are out in the parks and loving them every weekend. So that's the sign of great health with the parks, that they're so crowded. We got to deal with that kind of a problem rather than people not being out there enough.
Yeah, and we had our volunteers out there near the Riverside Boat Club pruning trees because often the trees come down and hit the bicyclists.
Yes.
So to do the tree pruning helped. It was done by Riverside Boat Club rowers, and even the television crews who were looking for people who would run and bike. They saw the pruners and they filmed the pruners. So that was nice to have the people who make all this physical activity possible to have them honored as well, because the Conservancy we have 2,500 volunteers out a year. In the winter it's tree pruning, and in the other season it's the brush cutting.
And you can really see that difference when you're walking out on the Esplanade and on the Cambridge side as much as I do. You can see the difference that the volunteers make. You know when they've been out and you know when they haven't been out. So I get to be the beneficiary, along with a lot of other people, of all that volunteer time. And
there's always a huge effort on the Saturday after Earth Day. This year it's the 24th of April, where along the entire Charles will be thousands. And just on the Cambridge side, where the Conservancy oversees the volunteers, we'll have 800 people, and they'll pick up all the bottles and the debris that's left after the winter. So I think you will see a difference.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of branches that are down after the rain and the ice that we've had, so you'll have a lot of work that day.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what connects Cambridge with Boston, and I'm talking about the bridges. You walk them regularly. Tell us about the the bridge project, the bridge restoration project. So we're talking about the furthest downriver would be the Craigie Bridge next to the Museum of Science, and then the Longfellow Bridge, and then the BU Bridge, the the River Street and Western Avenue Bridge. So if you can just kind of walk us through of what's happening and how that affects people in Cambridge and how that's progressing.
So we'll start with the first one you mentioned that's pretty far along, is the Craigie Dam Bridge and the Craigie Drawbridge by the Science Museum. So for people who are trying to walk around or bike around the river basin, you have to leave the parkland and go up onto the streets and pass in front of the Museum of Science and then come back down. So it's a very awkward connection, and it's on a very busy street with very narrow sidewalks, difficult for cyclists. So there's been a real focus with those two bridges of really making better pedestrian and cyclist connections, widening up the sidewalks, making it easier for the cyclists on that road where there's no bike lanes at the moment. And so for every bridge in the river basin, and I have all of those bridges in my district except the Western Avenue Bridge, for all of those bridge projects, there's been a very heavy emphasis on improving the pedestrian connections and making it safer for the cyclists so that those who are trying to use it for transportation can do that, and those who are trying to connect with the parklands can get better connections to the parklands. So we're really trying to help the Mass Department of Transportation, which now has responsibilities for these bridges, to think about this not just as a bridge project for the vehicles, but as a bridge project for the vehicles, the pedestrians, the cyclists, and all of the users of the bridge. And the Highway Commissioner, Louisa Paywanski, is very familiar with this idea and very supportive that this isn't just about the cars and the trucks. This is also about the pedestrians and the cyclists.
And for instance, at the Craigie Bridge, you might have seen either as a bicyclist or as a driver, that there's now a new sign called a share ride. I think that's
or share the lane.
Share the lane.
Share the lane.
And it's actually not just a sign up. It's painted very big on the middle of the lane. So that tells both the cars and the bicyclists that they are welcome to ride in the middle of the lane. And I think it's an adjustment probably for a lot of cars to see bicyclists in the middle of the road. But I think that is one way to acknowledge that these bridges are actually part of the parklands, but they're also major transportation routes. So it's a big challenge to bring the two together.
It is, and I'm not sure that that's the long-term solution, to have a share the lane program as opposed to what we now have in the Longfellow Bridge, which is a dedicated bicycle lane. It's not very wide, so we're hoping that we can, in the final configuration of the Longfellow Bridge, create a little more breathing room for the cyclists and get, of course, wider sidewalks. So I'm not as big a fan of the sharing.
I'm not sure it's a solution, but it's
better.
It's better, and it creates awareness that before then didn't exist. And I bicycle everywhere, and normally when you travel in the middle of a car lane, people honk at you, and at least they know you allowed to be there. So that it's a one step forward.
Right, yes, it's one step forward. I'm just hoping that the long-term solution on all of the Charles River Bridge crossings is that we have dedicated bike lanes and sidewalks that are sufficiently wide, that the pedestrians can pass one another comfortably. You know, I was out on Sunday, as I mentioned, and for my walk around the river basin and across the Longfellow Bridge, and those sidewalks are much too narrow. It's very uncomfortable. And at one point on both sides of the bridge, the sidewalk just ends.
And imagine you have a baby carriage, not to speak of a wheelchair, and